Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and today on the program our conversation is on the economic and business outlook for 2014, and we're actually looking at a report put together by the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I have here with me in the studio the Director General of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, that's the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and that's what our conversation has been for the past couple of minutes, and he's still here with me in the studio. Thank you so much, Buddha, for staying around.
Thank you.
Now, we talked about the informal sector. You mentioned it in passing while we were speaking. The Central Bank of Nigeria is actually projecting that real output growth will reach about 7.3% this year. Is this realistic, especially since you have mentioned a number of risks that we should be looking out for this year, especially the political risk, the policy risk, fiscal risk, as well as exchange risk?
Well, for the real sector of the economy, the challenges are still there. Again, let me say this. There are challenges and there are opportunities. Even in the midst of the challenges, if you have the capacity to surmount or cope with the challenges, there's a lot of profit to be made. But the challenge we have, and that is why we have the challenge of unemployment, problem of growth not being inclusive, is the capacity of the small businesses to be able to cope with the challenges. Because it is the small business that can pull the economy out of poverty and out of unemployment. So in all of this, we must constantly take into account how we can create the environment for small businesses to be able to be more productive, to be able to be more competitive. There is really nothing on the horizon as we speak to give the impression that the cost of doing business will be lower this year, for instance. We are seeing what is happening in the energy sector. There has been, a lot of transformation, a lot of movement, or a lot of motion, but no movement yet. Privatization, but the challenge of energy is still there. You can't have a productive real output or productive real sector if you don't have an affordable and reliable energy delivery system. The cost of fund is still high. So I don't see how it will be possible to be running a business which is real sector business at 30%, for instance, or even a Greek at 30%, and be able to expect very good performance. So we have issues of logistics, moving products from one point to the other. We have institutional issues like clearing your cargo from the port and all of that. We have issues with influx of goods from finished goods, cheap, sometimes substandard, sometimes fake, from particularly from Asia. So these fundamental issues are still there.
What about the
and
risk?
there's nothing on ground to give the impression or give the hope that these things will disappear in the next 12 months.
Okay, so let's now still focus on some of those risks that was actually highlighted in that report. I know I mentioned it already. We've talked about the fiscal risk. Let's talk about the political and policy risk.
Well, the political risk has to do with the fact that for businesses that are public sector driven, for businesses that are operating in the public sector space, political risk, which is also related to policy risk, is a very high risk in this environment. I've had experiences of investors who had transactions with some state governments, and because there was a change of governments, even with the same party, it became a big issue. The payment he could not get the payment. You know, a lot of public sector transactions are driven by contacts within the system and are driven by other interests, especially now that we are approaching an election year. It's a period that calls for a lot of caution for public sector related transactions, because a lot of people have burned their fingers. People have borrowed money to execute projects that they are not paid for. And unfortunately, you are in a system, an environment where it is not easy to get redress. You say, okay, government has defaulted in paying you and something, you want to go to court. First, you have to pay the lawyer. Second, you can be there for another 3, 4, 5 years. So by the time investors weigh these options, sometimes they just forget about seeking redress or going to court and begin to struggle with the system. And in the process of struggling with the system, all sorts of unholy things happen. You know? So political risk is something to worry about at this time, particularly when there are likely to be a lot of changes, particularly with the kind of dynamics that we are seeing now in the political space and all of that. So for public sector related projects are more vulnerable. And that is one thing about these risk issues. Some sectors are not as affected as others.
What sectors
what is important in managing risk in business is that you determine first the kind of risk. You have highlighted quite a number of risk variables. You determine the probability that the risk can occur in your business. Then you now determine the impact of the risk on your business. If the probability that it will occur is low and the impact is low, you don't have to worry.
Okay, so now could you just highlight some of those sectors that are less probably to be hit by this risk? Because I'm very sure that there is no sector that is totally immune to the shock of a risk.
Yes, that's the point I'm making. The risk impact varies from sector to sector. Okay, let's take security risk, for instance. The security risk for an oil-producing company. We are talking now about security in the Niger Delta and all of that. The security risk to an oil-producing company is much higher than the security risk to an oil marketing company. The security risk to a power sector operator, for instance, a power generating company, because you need gas to power the power plants, it's much higher than the security risk maybe to, for instance, to a telecoms company. Because once anything goes wrong with the gas supply, the entire chain is in trouble. So the model for businesses should be to determine what element of risk is applicable to a particular business, to a particular sector. What is the probability that this risk will crystallize, and what will be the impact of the risk? If the impact will be high and the probability will be high, then you have to do something seriously about it.
Now,
that is the general principle.
Okay,
for managing some of these risks.
Now, Muda, let's take a look at something else that we're expecting to happen. In fact, should start to happen by this month. There are going to be changes in and from the Central Bank of Nigeria. They're going to have the appointment of 5 members of the Monetary Policy Committee ahead of its first meeting of the year. Then an appointment of a replacement for Tunde Lemo, who is as the Deputy Governor Operations Directorate, and the appointment of a new governor owing to the exit notice given by the incumbent, which should happen in June. Now, does organized labor not look at this as a possible risk to the economy?
Well, it is a possible risk, but possible risk from a policy risk perspective. Because the personality of the CBN governor could make a whole lot of difference in the policy space, particularly monetary policy space. You can predict the policy direction of the current CBN governor, Hamidu Sanusi. You know where he stands, and you know he's a man of very strong conviction. Once he takes a position, it is difficult to shift him. You know that he's a pro, exchange rate stability person. He's a pro no inflation person, and is ready to make all the sacrifice necessary to ensure the stability of exchange rates.
Always remember that even in spite of all the sacrifices, it's all for the greater good, because he definitely wouldn't want
of course he's doing it
to suffer.
Of course they do these things in good faith, but you see, the outcome of policies, because you are talking of economic policies, it's not all the time that you have a convergence of views. and those at the receiving end, they have issues with some of these policies. That is the point. It's not as if it doesn't mean well. Of course, it means well. But it is one thing to be the driver of a policy. It's another thing to be at the receiving end of the policy.
True.
So that is where some of us have a challenge. If those who are operators in the economy are saying this policy is affecting us this way, for instance, the CBN governor doesn't worry so much about interest rates. It's a concern for us. If you know the kind of debt burden that businesses are carrying, look at virtually all the airlines. They have been virtually taken over by AMCON. Why? Part of the reason is the high cost of fund. You borrow 800 million today, before you know it, the thing has doubled. It's a race that you continue to constantly, it's a race against interest rate. So it's a big issue. And of course it's debatable. That is why you could say, okay, there are arguments for, there are arguments against. But the point I'm making is that we have a clear policy position of monetary policy position now, which is a tight monetary policy position. We are seeing what is happening to CRR. We are seeing what is happening to monetary policy rate. Even if you have a change of leadership and a change of membership of MPC, I don't foresee any immediate change of this policy position, at least within the next 12 months. Okay. I don't imagine that somebody will come there today and begin to dismantle all the structure that is there. I don't imagine that.
Well, Muda, what is the global outlook like for 2014, and more importantly, how will it affect the Nigerian economy?
Well, the global outlook is positive. From all the reports that we've read, the global economy is recovering very fast. From about 1.5%, we are looking at 3.1% now of the global economic performance. And if you look at the components that make up that, the Eurozone, which was in recession for the past 2 years, is getting out of recession now. So they are looking at a positive growth trend in the Eurozone. The emerging economies are also not doing badly, although a few of them may be posting slightly slower growth. But overall, we are looking at a growth of emerging economies of about 5%, which is also not bad. Then growth in sub-Saharan African countries is also very high. Being developing economies, the scope for growth and development is still high because the potentials, all sorts of untapped resources are there. So generally, growth in sub-Saharan Africa is also very high. The growth prospects, we are looking at around 6%, and yes, Nigeria falls in that bracket. So by the time you pull all this together, you will see that in terms of the global economy, the outlook for this year looks fairly good. And this will rub off on us because we are a resource-dependent economy.
And don't forget as well that Nigeria is also hosting the World Economic Forum Africa, so which means that now more than ever, foreign investors are actually beginning to see the big potentials that we've always been talking about that Nigeria has. Yes. So we should be expecting to see at least more foreign direct investment coming into the country for this year. So it's not all gloom and blue for us.
It's not all gloom. I mean, we already have them all over the place. You have them. What we are talking about is, where do your own indigenous operators, how are they faring? Because they are the ones that will deliver the benefits. Foreign direct investment is good, but domestic investment environment for your own entrepreneurs is even better. Because that is where the salvation is. That is where the jobs will come from. If Harriet and Co. sets up a company and you make so much money, it is better for this economy because you are likely to reinvest here. You are not likely to take it abroad. Okay,
well, Muda, we're so fast spent for time, but just quickly now, which sector should more emphasis now be placed on, agriculture or manufacturing?
You see, our position is that government will create an enabling environment. It's also not a sectoral issue. It's an environment issue. If you fix power, you fix road, you fix the financial system to get the funds, all the sectors will come up. Okay. Because we have very creative entrepreneurs here. Just create the environment. Make it easy for people to do business. Then a lot of developments will begin to manifest.
Muda, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the program. It's been quite an interesting conversation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Well, I've been speaking with the Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Muda Yusuf, and we've been reviewing the Chamber's 2014 Economic and Business Outlook Report. Also, thank you to Sani Zovehe for sending in your comment. It also added to the richness of the conversation that we had for today. But that's the program, the midweek edition of the program for today. And I'm Harriet Agbe. Top of the hour is news track.